homelessness is actually quite the opposite of that understanding. So it's important to note, and it's highlighted in here, you saw the image, some of you know Alice Skirts, you saw the image of Alice 30 years ago and today talking about the same exact issues. Homelessness, modern day homelessness, was started in the 1980s because the Reagan administration cut safety net services, cut spending on housing by the billions of dollars. And we went from, in 1982, in the whole country, whole year, estimated 250,000 people to, by 1986, estimated 3 million people. 1982 was 250,000 to 500,000, 3 million by 86. And so that meant all across this country and in this city, the few service providers that had existed prior to serve people experiencing homelessness were now flooded with new folks. And they didn't fit the typical middle-aged man suffering from addiction and mental illness. They were kids, people out of work, couldn't make the mortgage payment or the rent payment. And so that's when our homeless coalition formed with a clear vision that homelessness is a systematic problem, and so we have to take on the system. Homelessness is an issue that for the past 35 years has been blamed on the people experiencing it. So we talk about how folks could make better decisions or budget their money better or go have better educations or whatever it is, less children. But all of that really is not what causes the problem. And it only takes a little bit of simple logic to think about it. If we have millions of people in this country experiencing the exact same issue over and over for 35 years, it makes absolutely no sense, even logically, to blame the individual. And so we're going to fast forward to present day and talk about what we can do in our city now, and talk about how ways in which we are not welcoming our brothers and sisters and ways in which we can. So I want to start with what may be a boring topic, but an important one, which is zoning. How many people in here love zoning? Probably not many. So zoning, in case you didn't know, its purpose is to designate what type of building can be where, right? So that, simply put, we don't end up with a home right beside a factory, right? Because that may be unhealthy for the people that live in that home. But in this city and cities across the country for years, zoning has been used instead to say where certain people can be and other people can't be. And in our city right now, our planning department is currently rewriting the entire zoning code for the city. It's the first time that it's been rewritten in decades. And so it's a big deal, and probably almost nobody in the room knew about it. And that's not your fault. That's the city's fault. It is currently in its third draft. The third draft is not done, nor has it been released. But this is a copy of the second draft. And I want to highlight, in particular, permanent supportive housing. So you can see right there where I've got sort of highlighted. Permanent supportive housing is a federal term. It means housing that is subsidized and for people exiting homelessness with a diagnosed disability. The disability might be physical, mental, it could be addiction, diagnosed disability. And currently in our city, if one of our member organizations wishes to construct permanent supportive housing, or really any other type of housing, they can own the land, they can have the permitting, they can match the zoning, they can even have the funding to build it, and it still seems to take at least 5 years before maybe they break ground, if they get to. And those 5 years are not spent raising the funds. Those 5 years are spent in political battle, because almost any neighborhood in this entire city or county, we have 52 neighborhoods in the city, people will come out of the woodwork to fight permanent supportive housing or any other type of affordable housing. And when I say fight, I don't know that it fully describes it, because the meetings in which we sit with the folks that disagree with us, they are nasty at best. And the prime example of recent history is the proposed Commons at Alaska in Avondale, the neighborhood of Avondale. In that particular situation, and this is not special to Avondale, it's repeated neighborhood and neighborhood over. But the comments were things like, well, I don't want these drug-infested people on my block. I don't want to be walking down the street and have somebody hit me in the back of the head. I don't want my kids to be unsafe. The schools are too close. Do these people have the ability to come and go at will, or are they locked in? And of course, the answer is, well, do you come and go at will? And so everybody does, right? But no, the concept is, well, if you're going to put it here, it should be a prison. People should just not be able to come out. And in that case, it's very similar to what I described earlier. The developer owns the land. They have the funding. They were named the #1 project by the Ohio Housing Finance Agency in the entire state. The city helped them secure the land, helped them get rid of millions of dollars in liens, and we probably won't get it. It won't happen there for sure. And it's all because of political opposition. It's all because of this idea, if those people live here, they will ruin our neighborhood. They will drive down our property values and drive up the crime. And all of those claims, people believe that stuff like gospel. Just like you or I might say the sky is blue, that is the same for them in these beliefs. And I've started saying to these groups, look, you think that's the case? At our next meeting, bring the stats, bring the news articles and prove it. Because I know they don't exist. Because every study across this country shows that affordable housing in neighborhoods either has a neutral effect or a positive effect. It does not have a negative effect. And really, we should just know that, because people deserve quality housing, and any of us will be in a better state of mind, better able to live our lives and be kind to our neighbors if we have a solid foundation under our feet. That is just simply the truth. And we should know it, that it applies to everybody. So in this case, in the current draft, the city has specifically defined permanent supportive housing. And just a little bit of lesson on what these letters here mean. If you see a dash, that means not allowed at all, right? So all these up here are different areas of the city. And dash means not allowed ever at all. C means conditional, so it could be allowed, but you have to apply for essentially a bending of the rules. You have to get the neighborhood to agree with you and so forth and so on. And then the P means it's permitted by right. And you'll notice that as they've defined permanent supportive housing, the P's show up in very few areas, but the problem is bigger than that. Our contention and the contention of others is that permanent supportive housing, transitional supportive housing, you can see here, halfway house, all of that, that it shouldn't be defined in the zoning code. There are two arguments for it. One, we want to define it because we don't want it in certain places. The other argument is we want to define it so that we don't have to argue about where it can be. We think it's wrong to define it at all, because the fact is that permanent supportive housing, when it is done, it is no different from any other housing. The only difference, theoretically, are the people who live in it. And zoning definitions should not be dependent upon describing who resides in the building, but this one is. And in fact, it's also a breach of federal housing law, because the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 specifically states you cannot say where people with disabilities may or may not live, but that is exactly what this would do. And then I also want to highlight here special assistance shelter. So that just means shelter. And this is basically what we actually currently have in our current law. But you'll notice there are only 7 places that it's allowed, and only by condition. There's no place in this draft where it's allowed by right. And nearly all of these locations where you see the R's, for example, and these D's here. Nearly all of those locations are industrial. They're almost all industrial. They are places where people don't live because they are not suitable for people to live. But yet, this draft would say that is the only place that maybe you can place a shelter.
John, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
go
Can
ahead.
you give us
Yeah.
some examples of like current institutions that would fall into the special assistance shelter category?
Yeah, yeah. And so typically in zoning, just so you know, typically existing buildings, existing structures are grandfathered in. So a lot of this would come into play if, say, an organization wanted to expand or create something new or anything like that. But some examples of special assistance shelter would be the drop-in center, would be City Gospel Mission, would be Bethany House Services, which is a family shelter. It would be Interfaith Hospitality Network, which you all as a congregation host here. It would be all of those sorts of places. Every form of shelter in the city would fall into that category.
What does the L mean under the list?
Yeah, good question. So this L over here, I can't tell you specifically what it means, but it means that it's not a C or a P, there are added requirements. In some cases, it's dependent upon what number's beside it, but in some cases it might mean, the building can't be over 2 stories
Now,
or over a certain square footage.
Okay, could you